Today, we are talking about simplifying workflows with bulk tools. And this is going to be a quite a high level overview of what is possible. But we will have an opportunity for questions at the end. So we're going to have a little look at which workflows the developer community bulk tools are useful for. I'm going to talk a little bit about those tools, and I'm also going to talk a bit about the APIs as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of other options for doing some of these things if it all feels a bit daunting. And then, as I say, I can take questions. Um, do do use the chat to ask questions, or actually, rather than the chat, if you've got a specific question, if you pop it in the Q&A panel, that should be visible to you, and then I'll be able to answer them and manage them from there. Okay, so which workflows are we going to talk about today? The the top one that's top of mind and is perhaps the thing that happens most often is around updating links on resources. Typically, this happens when there is a change in publisher platform, and that happens every now and then. Um, and the the most recent one is the news around kind of Clarivate and how that is impacting people's purchasing decisions. And so the possibility of having to move a lot of resources on reading lists from one platform to another can seem quite daunting. Um, Other workflows might be around curriculum reviews within the universities. The module structure is changing, perhaps quite drastically, and you want to update lists and relink them to things without having to manually go in and be updating thousands of lists. Sort of aligned to that, but it can also be an annual thing as well, is around resetting student numbers. You might have a feed of numbers from your registry system. You might have used the hierarchy upload to put those numbers into the hierarchy, but then you might want to realign the lists with the numbers that the hierarchy are using for reviews and digitized content. Another workflow might be around, I've called it boilerplate here. That was to try and make it short and fit on a slide. But basically, you could add anything to this around any content to a list, like a section, an item, a paragraph. And the boilerplate nature of this is it might be something that relates to how to get help from the library, or it might be something about access to accessible versions of content on the list and information for students about how to request those types of things. And you might want to have that appear on every list. And yeah, anything else you can think of. I mean, these are just four kind of fairly big examples. Um, but there are, yeah, potentially lots of things that you could think of doing where there might be a key point in your workflows where you just want to make a change to a lot of lists or a change to a lot of items all at once. So, which tools are we talking about? We're talking about the bulk tools, is what we tend to call it. It's the full title is the Developer Community Bulk Tools. And this is a set of code that was contributed by the community, by various people within the community a few years ago. And it's still in use today. People are still making the most of this. The tools are installed on your machine, and we'll go through the kind of the overview workflow of that at the moment. And those tools will allow you to do a whole bunch of things to support some of those workflows that I've just talked about. So the bulk tools that are available are changing item importances. So you might want this if you're reviewing how you're um, flagging the importance of items to the academics. You might be doing this as part of switching to enable mandatory importances and deciding which of those is going to be mandatory. You might be retiring some of your old importances. Changing list owner, that might be something that perhaps in conjunction with some of the other things about changing module codes and renaming and changing the hierarchy association of lists, might be something that you do as part of a curriculum review. Adding items using a template to many lists. The template I'm referring to here is basically you write in code which items and which sections you want to add to each list. And then the code takes that set of instructions. You could perhaps think of it as a recipe, perhaps more than a template. And it will add those things to each of the lists that you specify. And you would use this to add a, like I say, an accessibility information or research guides or other things to the lists. It was used, if anybody remembers the days of COVID, it was used back then to add kind of library availability times, opening times, COVID information to the top of every single list for a few customers. Something like that is actually something that you probably want to reverse at some point. So you can also delete known things from lists. So you can delete the items that you might have added with one of the other scripts. You might even delete lists if you're doing a really thorough and kind of big tidy up. And again, sections can also be deleted. Obviously, those things are quite, well, deleting is final, but you always have to specify which of those, exactly which item is going to be deleted. So it's not like you're just going to accidentally delete things. If you tell it to delete something, it will delete that something. But if you don't tell it to delete something else, it'll be safe. So, it's there's a risk, but not a high risk. Um, Updating ISBNs, LCNs, making the view online button be open URL. Those are all tools that are obviously editing the resource itself, keeping the collection metadata healthy. There's an example in the bulk tools of making a list of new acquisitions. And this particular tool was taking information from a library system, pulling out all the ISBNs and the other metadata, creating resources and adding those resources to a reading list. And the idea was to kind of create a monthly new items added to stock type list. Not sure if that ever got used in production, but it was an interesting idea that people were tinkering with. There are tools to change the list status and tools to change the time periods. The one I saved to last is the one that most people are using the bulk tools for, and that is for updating URLs. URLs can be updated quite simply using a simple file format with some columns which say which item should be updated, what the old URL was that we should be looking to update, and what the new value should be. Now, that new value could be empty, which means that we just remove the URL, or the new value will be the new URL to the new location. And so you can use it to either add, update, or remove URLs. If the old URL is empty, but there is a new URL in the file, then it will actually add the resource. So if you know you've got to add a whole bunch of links to a whole specific set of resources, You can just specify that in a file and then run that through the bulk tool and it will update those resources. Oftentimes, when working with the bulk tools, you'll find that you're planning a sequence of actions which involve picking from several of these tools in order to do things in a certain order. Or perhaps in the case of updating URLs, to actually do a number of passes to update URLs in either different ways or to kind of move things through various stages in your workflow. So, and this is a very much an overview of kind of the process of using bulk tools. You will install some software on your machine. You will need administrator access to be able to do that. It installs a little web server on your machine, and technically that web server could be hosted anywhere. It doesn't have to be the web server that we specify in the bulk tools documentation, but that's probably the easiest one to actually get started with. Um, you would then need some credentials, and those credentials you'd get from via a support ticket. We would provide those to you. Those credentials will allow you to use our APIs to add, to read the data and also to write the data. So you would want to be able to do both. You would want to prepare your data to suit the script you'll be running. Now, each of the scripts takes an input file which tells the script what to do, which items to work with, which lists to work with, what actions to take, what values to update. So you'd usually start with an all list items report if you're updating items, or it might be a all lists report if you're doing something with the lists. And you would start with that report. You'd use the report filters to narrow down to just the items you want to update. You'd then export that. And then in tool like Excel, you would prepare the columns that are needed for the actual values that you're going to be changing. As I say, each of the scripts in the bulk tools will tell you what file format it wants and what it's expecting to see. So you just have to prepare the data to match those specifications. Always do a test run and always test with just one thing first. And then if you're feeling a bit braver after the one thing, try maybe 10 things. And then after that, you can kind of scale up to do several hundred in one go. Um, Always do a test. I mean, I'll say it again, always do a test. You never know what will happen. Not only does the test that the thing that you're going to change will happen, but it also tests that you've got things like the column formatting right. You've got the right number of columns, the values in the columns are the right shape. Like if we're looking at all list items, you typically need just the item ID in the columns rather than the full URL and things like that. So always do a test. It will give you errors, and we can help you with those errors if it doesn't mean anything to you. You can just raise a support ticket, it will help you out. The bulk tools, as I say, it runs on your own machine unless you've hosted it somewhere on a web service. If you do host it on a web service somewhere on a web server, please make sure it's not a public one. Please make sure it's fully secure because anybody uploading a file to that web service might be able to edit some stuff on your reading lists. So the safest way is to kind of run it on a local machine so that you've got full control of when it's running and who is running it. So that's been an overview of the bulk tools. Now, under the hood, the bulk tools are using the APIs, and don't worry, I'm not going to change any code here. I'm just talking about the possibilities here with Talis Aspire's APIs. Basically, if you can change something in the Talis Aspire list edit screen, there is probably an API for that, and you can think of ways to perhaps is there a way that that activity in the edit screen could be something that you might want to do in bulk across a lot of things? So yeah, the at support.talis.com, you will find an article called Developer APIs. They're easy to search for. And in there, it will talk about both our open APIs, which don't require login. They don't allow you to update data. It's just reading data. But they'll also talk about our authenticated JSON APIs. And these are the ones that the Bulk Tools is using under the hood. These are the ones that will actually edit data. I've also included a screenshot here of the API documentation, and I know it's going to be quite small on some of your screens, but you can see there that there's APIs for things like updating item importances, getting a list of importances from your tenancy, getting a list of time periods from your tenancy, getting published lists, getting draft lists. So there's a whole lot of stuff that you can do with the API that is perhaps unexpected in some cases. But this API is also being used by people who are integrating with their curriculum module validation systems as well. You'll be pleased to know that that's all I was going to say about APIs. Unless you've got any particular questions, then please do pop them in the Q&A. I did want to talk a little bit about consulting because I do recognize that for some people, having the overhead of running bulk tools or even thinking about writing anything with the API is something that you're just not ready for. But sometimes there might be something that actually needs to be done, and it might be a critical part of the project. It might be something that you perhaps don't have time to learn to do now, even though you'd like to do it in the future. It might be something that if you were to have your team do it, then it might need your team to spend several days doing that. And obviously, time is probably the most expensive thing that we work with in the library, apart from a few ebooks. But time is something that we can help with because you can pay us to use our time to do some of these things, basically. Um, we will hopefully provide you with confidence. That's certainly some of the feedback that we've had from previous consulting work that we've done with customers, that we've helped to kind of guide the project, set clear goals, set clear timescales, share experience of doing similar things with other customers, and kind of sharing ideas around how to approach the particular solution that's necessary. And of course, I mean, even without consulting, you can always ask us questions. There's no such thing as a silly question, as I'm sure you've heard our team say on a many occasion. We are constantly telling each other that. And we broadly have kind of two consulting modes. We either do something for you, where we work with you to establish exactly what you need, when you need it by. We do all the heavy lifting, and then we give you the kind of an approval step where you pre-check the data that we're going to be changing and say, yep, go ahead. That's the kind of the most hands-free in terms of planning your own time. Or there's the consultative training aspect where we do it with you. We'll actually work with you to understand the solution you're looking for, help you plan the work, identify the tools you need, help you get set up, and leave you with the confidence that you'll be able to do similar things in the future. So I've mentioned support. I've mentioned that you can ask us questions at any point in terms of raising tickets, and we will help you with the bulk tools as best we can. But sometimes you actually just want to find out how other people are using things. And so obviously a webinar like this, if anybody's willing to share how they've used the bulk tools in a little bit, then I'm more than happy to open the floor to you. But the open discussions as well that we host monthly in the EU, it's the first Wednesday of the month. In APAC, in Australia and New Zealand, it's the second Wednesday in the month. It was actually 5 a.m. this morning. And in North America, it's the third Wednesday of the month. Those open discussions are available for you to talk about anything you like. It's literally a drop-in session. We are starting with topics now, just to kind of give people a reason to come. We'll ask some questions, but it is about the community joining those discussions and sharing their experience and asking questions, asking for help, and so on. So if you haven't joined the Discord community already, do. There's a screenshot there of a QR code, and the link will take you to the Discord community. Even if you just want to lurk, the product team are also there. They've been trialing some of the bookmarking things in the community. So there's a few things going on there. And that is where I'm going to stop at this point and have a look at the Q&A panel. And I can see we've got a question here, which is, does technology from Sage intend to develop the bulk tools into the Aspire environment itself eventually? The requirement to install third-party software and configure bulk tools can be quite challenging, particularly for libraries without dedicated system teams and with institutions having to manage with fewer staff. Being able to have all the same functionality but inbuilt would be excellent. Being able to do everything within the system would address the security concerns you've mentioned as well. Absolutely. There's no plans immediately to do that, but we are regularly feeding back into the product team's planning about the ways that people are using the bulk tools. And one of the things that I would kind of ask as an outcome from this webinar is that if you've done something with the bulk tools that you are interested in being able to do more easily in a kind of a specific way, because the bulk tools are solving a problem in one way, but if something was to go into the product, it might well be solved in a slightly different way. And so understanding the workflow behind the use of the tool is actually important for the product team. So if anybody does want to share about those types of things, then I would direct you actually at the ideas portal, because to summarize how you're using the bulk tools and what the value of that actually being in the system would be is something that the product team can then review and feed into their planning of future features. So that was that question. I don't think there are any more questions at the moment. Would anybody like to share anything about how they've been using bulk tools already? Kind of putting you on the spot, I know, but if you'd like to, I can I'll unmute you and let you know. If you use the, I think you can raise your hand or pop a message in the chat if I'm not seeing it. Ruth, let me find you in the list. There you go. Allowed to talk.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Hi, Ruth. Yes.
Yeah, it's a long time since I've been back in the developer tools. Used to use it quite well. Didn't used to use the tools so much, but used to be quite a bit in community. When Dawson's was our principal time when we used the tools before the URL updater was a lifesaver at that point in time. I think if you can get over the technical difficulties of XAMPP and things, which I'm currently coming back to because of restrictions on admin rights and things, the actual doing the things is quite is relatively easy once you've got over there preparing the data and doing the updates. As you say, test, test, test again. Set up your test list now. Get your items that you're going to change. But once you've got beyond that X, it's the XAMPP bit that's the real. That's this. It's not difficult to do. The instructions there are very clear, but it's just that's the where you're likely to hit the technical problems. And beyond that, it's probably just double checking that you've got the right format, that you've saved in the right kind of CSV, because there's multiple. So it's a lot of those things. So if you've got that bit of technical knowledge, it's fairly simple to use them. I haven't used any of the others. I don't think we've not updated lists in that way. We don't use the lists in quite those ways that we've done it. We've done when we did do a bulk removal of lists, it was more manual, so we didn't use the tools because we were liaising with academics and things at the same time. But say it isn't. I mean, I'm sort of mid-ground techie. I've not got a computer science degree or anything. Do quite a bit with stats and things, but got a little bit of technical and not afraid to sort of have a go at things. And if you kind of got that, not afraid to have a go at things, it's relatively simple. She says, "Don't hate me for it."
Thank you, Ruth. Yes, I think it's relatively simple. I don't have a computer science degree either. Um, so we got a message from Peter. He's installed on a tools on a local PC at the library, but he hasn't had a chance to use them yet. But planning to tackle a backlog of changing URLs to HTTPS and adding an accessibility note to some scans. They're proposing removing Gale resources from their EDS index as there's just so many irrelevant results. So the bulk tools job would be finding a way of replacing the 300 plus Gale items from their catalogue in Talis Aspire with URLs on Gale's own interface. I mean, that's a classic example of how the tool can help. Stuart at Glasgow is saying that he's used the bulk URL update a lot and used the LCN updating tool for a project, tidying up all those with check digits. The Dawson to VLE changes was another good example. Stuart says that the main issue was resetting the time limit to allow for larger updates, though 500 is the max that he's got to work. Yeah, so because because the bulk tools runs on the local system, and because it's a kind of a web-based process, there is some limits around the execution time that the web server will be happy with. So generally, it's a good idea to if you're doing thousands and thousands of items, is to do it in a number of goes, basically number of batches. There are other advantages to doing that, actually, the batched approach, because it means that if you have a power cut or if the network goes down or if you get interrupted by doing something else, it's much easier to know exactly where you left off and pick up that task again the next time you're ready to run some files, rather than trying to work out, at what point did the process stop and which ones have been updated and which ones haven't been updated. So, I mean, when we're doing updates, we're typically batching them up so that we can see the progress and always know exactly where things are at. Jill gives an example of switching the URL to open URL for a range of articles when there was a subscription change. A lot of people are using OpenURL for their resource list for your online links these days, because it does mean that your link resolver is then doing the thing of working out which link to send the student to, or even offering multiple links if there are multiple options with perhaps different licenses. And as Jill says, you've then still got the option via the link resolver to, well, assuming your link resolver supports this, is to request an ILL for anything that is suddenly unavailable through the original route. Um, I so Amjad is asking if I can give a demo of the steps for installing the software. I'm not going to do that, but what I will do is say that there is a demonstration of doing exactly that in a video, which you'll find on the developer community articles in the support site. And I'll refer you to the video because you can kind of stop the video, pause it, and kind of do things alongside to see how things are being done there. Tom is suggesting about kind of a more full-featured web-based tenanted solution. We've definitely thought about things like that and kind of the pros and cons and the time it would take to develop something like that. Um, and yep, it's definitely one of the ideas that is already in the system. And yeah, thanks, David, for sharing the article. So, thank you for your input. I think most of the examples given there, or certainly a large proportion of them anyway, were about URL updating. And so, yeah, what I will say is I'll draw the webinar to a close at that point. But if you do have any questions, we're always here. Raise a support ticket. We can help point you in the right direction. Or if you're actually going through the process of setting things up and you need a bit more support with that, we can help you with that. Do join the Discord community. There are lots of helpful people there, not just us. And yeah, it would be good to continue the conversation. So thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I hope that's been useful to give you that overview. And we'll see you again for the next community webinar, which is advertised on our event page. So thank you very much for your time.